For centuries, the galaxy had been ruled by a silent truth, a language long forgotten, buried beneath the weight of time. No species could speak it. No civilization could decipher it. It was a relic of an age so distant that even the oldest empires whispered of it in fear. But then, on a day that would change the course of history, humanity, a young and unremarkable species, stood before the great powers of the galaxy and spoke the impossible. For nearly 1,000,000 years, the Grand Conclave had stood as the center of galactic power. It was not just a council, it was a force that shaped the destiny of civilizations. The most ancient and influential species gathered here, their voices deciding the fate of entire star systems. And among the many laws that governed them, one stood above all others. No one spoke the forbidden language. It was not simply outlawed, it was feared. Even the most advanced minds of the galaxy had failed to understand it. Attempts to decode its symbols had led to catastrophic failures. Supercomputers burned out, scholars lost their sanity, and entire research stations mysteriously vanished. The oldest races whispered that the language was never meant to be understood, that it belonged to an age before any known civilization had existed. To even attempt to comprehend it was to invite disaster. So when a species as young as humanity requested an audience at the Grand Conclave, few paid attention. Compared to the mighty empires that had stood for hundreds of thousands of years, humanity was insignificant. They had no great fleets, no ancient wisdom, no claim to lost legacies. Their rapid expansion had been noted, their stubborn resilience acknowledged, but they were still a fledgling race in the eyes of the galaxy. And yet, they had brought something no one else had, a discovery so profound, so unthinkable, that it demanded attention. Human emissaries presented their findings with quiet confidence, placing before the conclave an artifact inscribed with markings that no species had ever managed to decipher. It was one of many such artifacts scattered across the cosmos, relics from a time before the rise of the current galactic powers. Most had long given up on unlocking their secrets, but humanity had not. They claimed they had not only translated it, but understood it. Laughter echoed through the great chamber. Disbelief spread like wildfire. It was absurd, impossible. No species, not even those who had ruled for 100 millennia, had come close to unraveling the language, and now these upstart humans expected the galaxy to believe they had done the unthinkable. The laughter, however, did not last long. Because humanity had not come to seek approval, they had come to prove a point. Before the assembled might of the galaxy, they did the one thing no living being had ever dared. They spoke. And in that moment, the universe itself seemed to shudder. The artifact was found drifting on the edge of a dying star system, orbiting a frozen world long abandoned to time. At first glance, it seemed like just another piece of cosmic debris, an ancient construct left behind by a civilization long extinct. But when the first human explorers examined it, they knew it was something far older, something untouched by the hands of any known species. It was a monolithic slab, forged from a material no scanner could identify, resistant to every method of analysis. No tool could scratch its surface, no signal could penetrate its core. Across its face, a series of intricate symbols covered every inch, etched with impossible precision. The markings were unlike any known script, yet they carried an undeniable sense of purpose, as if they were not just writing but something greater, something fundamental. Similar artifacts had been found before, scattered across the ruins of dead worlds and floating in the cold void of forgotten systems. The greatest minds of the galaxy had studied them for millennia, only to reach the same conclusion. They were unreadable, indecipherable. Some civilizations had attempted to force an understanding, using quantum analysis, AI decryption, and even genetic memory searches. Every attempt ended in failure, systems overloaded, minds fractured, knowledge lost. In time, the artifacts were deemed unsolvable relics of a past too distant to reclaim. But humanity was different. Where others saw an impossible mystery, humans saw a challenge. Instead of treating the symbols as mere text, they studied them like a code, searching for patterns in the chaos. They examined ancient star charts, the mathematical structures of known languages, and even the neurological structures of sentient thought. For decades, researchers worked tirelessly, cross-referencing every possible connection. Then, against all odds, something shifted. A single phrase, a fragment of meaning, emerged from the sea of unknowns. It was not just a translation, it was an awakening. The symbols were not merely words, but the foundation of all languages, a primal structure that underpinned communication itself. It was as if the very concept of speech had been born from these markings, as if they were the root of all understanding. As the pieces fell into place, the realization dawned. This was not just an ancient record. It was a key that, once spoken, might unlock something far greater than anyone had ever imagined. With this knowledge in hand, humanity did what no other species had dared. They prepared to speak the words aloud. When humanity announced their discovery, the galaxy reacted first with amusement, then with unease. The idea that a species so young had deciphered what the greatest civilizations could not was unthinkable. For millions of years, the forbidden language had remained beyond reach, an enigma that had defied even the most advanced minds. Now, these newcomers from an unremarkable world claimed they could not only understand it but speak it. It was a claim so absurd that most dismissed it outright, but the ruling empires of the galaxy were not laughing. To them, this was no mere academic breakthrough. The forbidden language was not just unknown, it was dangerous. Every attempt to study it had ended in disaster. Entire research stations had gone dark. Artificial intelligences had been reduced to incoherent gibberish, and scholars who had tried to comprehend it had suffered irreversible mental collapse. Some who had dared to vocalize its sounds had simply disappeared, erased from existence without a trace. The oldest among the conclave, those whose civilizations had endured for 100 millennia, warned that some knowledge was never meant to be reclaimed. The forbidden language was a force older than any empire, a power tied to an era so ancient that even the stars themselves had forgotten. But humanity was undeterred. They had never been ones to walk away from a challenge, especially when faced with the unknown. Their scientists had spent decades carefully reconstructing the linguistic structure, ensuring their understanding was not just theoretical but precise. They had run tests, simulations, and controlled experiments, mapping the effects of each spoken syllable. They had not rushed blindly into the unknown. They had prepared for it. So when the Grand Conclave convened and humanity stood before the greatest minds of the galaxy, they did not ask for permission. They did not seek validation. They simply spoke. The first word left the human envoy's lips, and the chamber seemed to vibrate, not through sound, but through something deeper, something fundamental. The very air felt heavier, charged with an energy that no instrument could measure. Across the system, ships reported sudden fluctuations in power, instruments flickering erratically. Stars, observed from distant monitoring stations, pulsed out of rhythm for a fraction of a second. But it was the conclave itself that experienced the most profound reaction. The oldest among them, the ones who had ruled the longest, stiffened in their seats. Their bodies froze, their eyes widened, and for the first time in recorded history, they were silent. They recognized the language, and that realization filled them with something no one had ever seen in them before: fear. The moment the forbidden language was spoken, something shifted across the galaxy. It was subtle at first, an unexplainable distortion in space, an unnatural stillness in the void. But as the echoes of the words spread, the effects became undeniable. On distant worlds, ancient structures long thought to be ruins trembled with new life. Cities buried beneath the sands of forgotten civilizations pulsed with a faint glow. Vast monoliths, untouched for millions of years, emitted signals that no species had ever detected before. Across the galactic core, dormant machines, colossal constructs that predated even the oldest empires, suddenly powered on. Their systems, inactive for untold ages, hummed with energy. The ruling species of the galaxy panicked. For eons, the forbidden language had been nothing more than a mystery, an unsolvable relic of a time before memory. It had been studied, theorized, and ultimately abandoned. Now, in an instant, humanity had turned it from a forgotten enigma into something active, something dangerous, and the effects were only beginning. Long-range probes stationed at the edges of the galaxy detected gravitational anomalies where none had existed before. Massive structures, hidden within the depths of black holes and neutron stars, began shifting. Some of the oldest species, those whose records stretched back over 1 million years, searched their archives in growing dread. They found ancient star maps that had always been missing something. Coordinates that had remained meaningless until now. Now they aligned. Now they pointed to something. Across the void, the consequences continued to unfold. Entire starships flickered with unexplained system malfunctions, their controls responding to commands that had never been given. At the center of the grand conclave, the oldest beings, those who had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, remained frozen, locked in a silence so absolute that even their own people grew afraid. They had known fear before. They had seen wars, cataclysms, and the collapse of great empires. But this was different. This was the return of something they had never expected to encounter again. The forbidden language was not just a language, it was a trigger, a key, and humanity had just turned it. What had once been forgotten was now awakening. The question was no longer whether the words had meaning. The question was who or what had been waiting to hear them. For the first time in history, the silence of the ancients was broken, and across the stars, something answered. The warnings came swiftly, carried on encrypted channels and ancient diplomatic frequencies that had not been used in millennia. The eldest civilizations of the galaxy, those who had once ruled as gods before fading into mere legends, sent urgent messages to humanity. Their tone was not one of command or authority, it was one of desperation. They pleaded, they begged, stop speaking the language, stop before it is too late. But humanity had never been a species to turn back from the unknown. Their scientists had spent decades unraveling the structure of the forbidden language, ensuring that each word, each phrase was understood before it was spoken. To them, this was not reckless curiosity. It was the greatest discovery in history. The warnings were noted, recorded, and debated, but in the end, humanity refused to walk away. The galaxy watched in horrified fascination. They had always seen humans as bold, adaptable, and relentless, but now they saw something else, something that terrified them. Humans were not just explorers, they were pioneers of the impossible. Where others had turned away in fear, they had pushed forward, undeterred by the risks. They had unlocked what no species had before them, spoken what no voice had dared to utter, and now they were willing to face whatever came next, and something was coming. The anomalies that had begun at the moment of first speech were escalating. The hidden machines beneath ancient ruins were no longer just awakening, they were activating. Across the galaxy, energy surges flickered through the void, striking long-dead constructs that had remained silent for millions of years. Some were colossal, larger than entire planets, their functions unknown but unmistakably deliberate. The star charts from the oldest archives now told a story that none had seen before. They revealed a pattern, a vast interconnected network that had been dormant since the dawn of time. The forbidden language was not just a means of communication, it was an interface, a control system for something so large, so ancient, that even the most powerful empires had never realized they were living in its shadow. And now that humanity had spoken it, it had begun to respond. The warnings grew more frantic. Some civilizations abandoned their home worlds, fleeing into deep space in hopes of escaping whatever had been reawakened. Others gathered their war fleets, not to fight humanity, but to prepare for something worse. Something they could not name. Something their ancestors had only described in whispers before vanishing from history. But humanity did not stop. They spoke the final phrase they had deciphered, and across the stars, the long-dormant machines turned their gaze toward Earth. The moment the final phrase was spoken, the universe itself seemed to shift. It was not an explosion, not a pulse of energy, but something deeper. Something that reached into the very fabric of existence. Space rippled, as if reality had been waiting for these words to be spoken. And then the response came. Across the galaxy, the ancient machines that had long remained silent began moving with purpose. Their structures, vast and incomprehensible, rearranged themselves, mechanisms clicking into place after eons of dormancy. Some, hidden beneath the crust of desolate worlds, rose from the ground, tearing through rock and soil as if they had merely been sleeping. Others, drifting in deep space like forgotten wreckage, surged to life, their hollow interiors filling with an energy no known science could explain. Every species watched in helpless terror. The civilizations that had once ruled the stars as gods now stood powerless, witnessing something beyond even their understanding. Their most powerful fleets, capable of annihilating entire planets, seemed meaningless against the scale of what was unfolding. The warnings they had given humanity had not been superstition or paranoia. They had been an attempt, perhaps the final attempt, to prevent what was now inevitable. Because the moment the forbidden language had been fully spoken, something long buried in the void had turned its attention to humanity. Near the galactic core, deep space observatories registered movement in places where nothing should move. Black holes, stable for billions of years, wavered as if something was pushing against them from within. Structures beyond comprehension emerged from the event horizons, massive, impossible constructs that should not exist in physical space. And yet, they did. The ancient races scrambled for answers. Who had built these things? What purpose did they serve? But as they searched their oldest records, they found only a single, terrifying truth. These structures had always been there. They had not appeared suddenly. They had not arrived from another time or place. They had always existed, unseen, unacknowledged, waiting. And humanity, in their fearless pursuit of knowledge, had spoken the words that finally gave them permission to act. The warning signals from the oldest civilizations stopped, not because they had nothing more to say, but because their transmissions simply ceased. Entire planets falling silent in an instant, the most advanced species in the galaxy, the rulers of empires spanning hundreds of thousands of years, simply vanished. And as Earth's deep space sensors picked up the impossible, as the first of the ancient machines locked onto humanity's homeworld with unknown intent, one question remained unanswered. Had humanity awakened something, or had they summoned it? As the first signals reached Earth, humanity braced itself. The galaxy had gone silent. Entire civilizations had vanished, their worlds left cold and empty. The ancient machines, vast, unknowable, and impossibly advanced, had turned their attention toward the species that had reawakened them. Humanity stood alone. The first structure arrived in Sol's outer system without warning. It did not travel through space in any way humanity understood. It simply appeared as if it had always been there. It was massive, larger than Jupiter, its surface shifting like liquid metal, yet holding a form both precise and alien. Every attempt to scan it returned nonsense. Measurements fluctuated wildly, as if it existed outside the laws of physics. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in raw understanding. The message struck the minds of every human at once, bypassing language and technology entirely. It was neither hostile nor welcoming. It was something far more unsettling. You were not meant to understand, and yet you have. Across the void, more of the machines emerged. Some materialized in distant star systems, others at the very edge of human space. They did not advance, did not attack, did not demand. They simply watched, waiting. For the first time, humanity hesitated. The bravado that had led them here now carried the weight of the unknown. They had spoken the language, broken the seal on knowledge lost for untold millennia. But in their pursuit of understanding, they had never asked the most important question. Why was the language forbidden? The answer came not as an explanation, but as a realization, one so vast and terrifying that it could not be ignored. The ancient machines were not invaders. They were not guardians. They were custodians. The civilizations that had ruled before, the ones lost to time, had not been destroyed by war or disaster. They had spoken the language just as humanity had. They had unlocked the same knowledge, and in doing so, they had transcended beyond this existence, leaving nothing behind but the machines that remained to erase all traces of their passage. This was not a warning. It was an invitation. Humanity had reached the threshold of something greater than life, greater than the universe itself. The choice was theirs to make, to step forward and embrace the unknown, or to retreat and remain within the bounds of the physical world. The machines waited for an answer, and for the first time in their history, humanity did not know what to say.